Well, we're ready for another video. Oh, it's nothing special, but I just thought we'd talk about a few little kitchen-y things. Old kitchen-y things. Some that my mother had, some I've collected, and I want to show you. I'm going to tell you about these glasses need cleaning. I reckon you won't notice though. I'll put them to one side in case I need to read something. What I want to show you first is this. I'm going to try to scoot it a little closer to me so you can get a better view of it. Just hope I don't dump it in the lap. There you go. You see what this is? It's one of those big dough bowls the ladies used to use, and you've seen them in all the old Western movies and the Southern country movies. And I put a few items in it. Ordinarily, you'd see one of these bowls filled with flour. That's what it was used for, making biscuits, making bread, and loaves of bread, things like that. Anything that required flour. Now, I just threw in a few little vegetables for looks. I got my sweet potatoes, my onions, got my butternut squash, some carrots. These are little fingerling potatoes. You've seen them at the grocery now. About all you can buy. You buy the russet and it's these, but I want the Idaho potatoes. I've used Idaho potatoes my whole life, and so did my mother. They make the best mashed potatoes you can have. Used to use them for making potato salad, but if you didn't let those potatoes get good and cold first, you'd have mushy mashed potato salad. So I learned in the last few years about the red potatoes. You know what they look like. These are the little ones. These are the ones I use for roasting. You use those red potatoes. You don't have to do much peeling to them. Just cut them the way you want them and boil them. And you use those for your potato salad. They hold their shape better and they're still nice and soft for eating. Now, of course, my butternut squash is what I use in my harvest soup. And it's about the best soup I ever ate. It's great for serving guests when you want to put on a little flair and make things look kind of fancy. You feed your guest a pretty bowl of harvest soup. And of course, I've given that recipe and it's in my cookbook. And again, I'm going to tell the people that didn't catch it, the name of the cookbook is Make Mine the Blue Plate Special. And there's a story about the Blue Plate Special also in my book. So anyhow, I wanted you to see this dough bowl. I'm going to pick up another one and show it to you. It's the shape that most of the women used. See, it looked like this. Now you can tell this one hasn't been used much because they cleaned it and stained it and glazed it real good. But it still has the look, and a lot of them were bigger than this. I can remember my girlfriend just lived around the corner from me, and I spent about as much time at her house as I did my house. And always I was there partly because she had 3 brothers who collected funny books. You know what funny books are. They're the comic books. I love those comic books, but Mama wouldn't let me buy them. They cost $0.10 a piece. And these boys collected them. They had stacks of them. Now I would go to my girlfriend's house. It didn't matter whether she was home or not. I'd get a bunch of those comic books, and her mother would let me sit up behind the old warm morning stove. And I'd sit there till it started to get dark in the evening. And it was time for me to go home. But this lady had a great big flour bowl. I don't know what else you call them. And she kept it in her kitchen. I always wished Mama had one. I don't know why Mama didn't have one. Because Mama made a lot of biscuits. So this lady would roll out her biscuit dough. She'd mix it all in this big bowl like this. And when she got through, she covered the bowl with a dish towel and left it, and it's ready for the next day because they had biscuits every morning. And the thing is, they didn't empty the flour out of the bowl. They left the flour there after they had made their dough and pulled it out to roll it out. The flour stayed in that bowl and got covered. Next day they just added a little more flour and made more biscuits. Now, Jan had these two, and I said, Jan, let me borrow them. I always say I borrow them because sometimes I keep things. Anyway, she said, take them home with you. So I wanted you to see what these look like. And I was more or less looking for one shaped like this, but I wanted to have that worn, used look about it. And I'm still looking for just the right one at the right price. So that pretty well covers our dough bowl. I'm going to scoot it back a little bit. I've got a few other things to show you. One of those things is, when I was showing you my Jadeite and Pyrex collection, of course, Jan noticed that I forgot to describe this. Now, you've probably seen this. Your mother probably had one of these. Here, this is the measuring cup. Has the measurements on the side. And this set on top, it kept the spatters out when you were... See how that works? I used to just love to play with Mamas. And that's how you whipped your egg whites when you were making icings for your cakes and pies and things. This is what Mama used. Now, I've got another version of that, like this. See this one? Can you see it good? Okay. See how it twirls? It has a Bakelite handle. Now, some of you may not be familiar with Bakelite, but it's very collectible. Anything that has Bakelite, especially bracelets. People collect Bakelite bracelets, and there's some mighty pretty ones out there. So you're going to pay a pretty price for something that connected to Bakelite. I've got a couple other things that have the Bakelite handles. Are you familiar with this? See it? Can you see it good? Okay. And here's another one. See that? I'll put in front of my face like bars, you know. Okay. You can see those. And they both have the Bakelite handles. You know what they were used for? You cut your cake. Most people made 2- and 3-layer cakes back then. They didn't dump them in a tube pan. You cut your cake down into your cake, and then you pushed it out, and you let the slice of cake fall over on this, and then you put it on the dish. That's what these were used for, and every household had one of these. And of course, they didn't all have Bakelite handles. Some had wooden handles, metal handles. But anyway, I've got these two that I keep because I can't part with most of my things. Let's see what's next. The other Bakelite. This is the only other Bakelite thing I'm going to show you. This is a bottle opener. And I think these two little prongs here will open like jar lids. You know, they're a lot bigger. and you get the grip on that jar lid, especially the jar lid that where you've done your own canning, and it has that little plate in the top of the lid. After you've taken the lid off, put it aside. That little metal plate is still there, so you can get this under there and flip it up so they can open the jar. It has the brownish color, and it's the one can opener I use all the time because it gets those cans of tomato soup and tomato paste and tomatoes open real good so that you can pour them out. All right, what's next? Your ice cream scoop. Now this one's old. I don't know how old, but it's old. And it's got the little rip on the side that lets you, I'm not close enough to the camera for you to see this good, but I think you get the general idea of what I'm showing you. Let's go to, okay, here's some more. Goodness gracious. Do you remember when your mother or your grandmother used one of these? I've got 4 of them. Barely can see the little wires. See those wires? You can see it there. This one, get over here where you can see the wires. Can you see those? Yeah. There's another one. Now one of these belonged to my mother, and I can't remember which one it was, but I think it's this one right here. And I can remember her putting that big bowl in the crook of her arm. Of course, I'm left-handed, so I'll do it the way she would. She held that bowl sideways like that with her egg whites in it, and she whipped, and she whipped, and she whipped. And I used to think, Mama, your arm's gonna fall off before you get those egg whites whipped. But that's how she did her meringues and icing, was with this little egg beater. That's what you call it, an egg beater. What kind of potato masher do you use? Well, I know most people use their little handy dandy, you know what it is, mixer. But I don't use mixer for my mashed potatoes. I've always used a potato masher. And this one right here is the one I used for years and years. It's the kind Mama used. I still, to this day, think this is the best potato masher you can get. That's just my opinion. Here's another one. It's got a Bakelite handle. Now, you have to use little elbow grease with this one because it's got narrow slits in it, and it's a little harder to do your mashed potatoes. You didn't know there were that many different styles, I'll bet. Look at this one. It has a wooden handle. Now, I've never used it, but it looked rather interesting, don't you think? Don't you kind of like the looks of that? That's in my collection. Oh gosh, you know, it's nothing like collections. Woo! Another. Let me see. Yeah, this has got a Bakelite handle too. See how it's rounded off? I'm trying to get it in the light where you can see the prongs and see the handle, the Bakelite handle. Anything that's got a Bakelite handle to it, it's going to be collectible. But I've never used this one either. This was back when I was collecting all this stuff. And this is the other one. It's got the fine wires in between. There you go. Another potato masher. Let's see. I think there was one other little. Oh, yeah. You graduated with your egg beaters, and you finally got to where they were a little bit more modern. See this little thing? It was easier to work with. You just whip, 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 whip. Don't do that anymore. Now that takes care of the utensils. I'm going to show you this coffee pot just because it happened to be sitting here. I've got 2 of these, and for years I would see them in antique shops, and I wanted one, but the price was always too much. I just wasn't willing to pay the price. Now, I'm sure you've seen these somewhere and probably didn't pay any attention to them, but to me, this is one of the nicest teapots you can have, and for this reason. You see this silver part? Well, let's see what we can do. We can lift that off, and there's your teapot. This is your cozy. You've always heard about your grandmother having the teapot with a cozy, and if you were in England, they would not serve you hot tea without a cozy on the teapot. So this is my teapot with its cozy. I finally gave in one day, and the price was right, and I bought my teapot with the cozy. You see these little slits lined with felt inside, and you slide that down right over your handle and over the spout. Let me get it on there right. You just slide it down, and I guarantee you, I've tried it, it keeps your tea hot. So you ever see one of these, buy it just for your own pleasure. Okay, now let's get to the part of this program I want to talk about. Laundry day. Yeah, Mama had she had a nice Maytag washer when I was a teenager. And we kids would come home for lunch. And she would either fix us hamburgers or we'd have grilled cheese and tomato soup. That's what we got for lunch on wash day. Mama had a couple benches, and we had a big kitchen. And in the middle of the kitchen, she would set her washing machine, and on 2 benches about 4 feet long, she set her wash tubs. You know, those big old galvanized wash tubs. They had to be filled with water. Of course, she could fill those up. She had a hose. A hose was about 6 feet long. She could attach it to the sink faucet and run her hot water into those tubs. But in the afternoon, she had the Maytag washer. She had a first rinse and a second rinse. So when she was finished doing the laundry, she had to empty those tubs. Now, you know what that's like, dipping water out of those galvanized tubs into the sink? That's a lot of water. But Mama used that same hose. She put one end of it in the wash tub and the other end in the sink, and she siphoned the water from the tub, and it went down the sink drain. I used to stand and watch that, and I was fascinated that water would go through that hose and into the sink by itself, and Mama didn't have to dip it out. So I always remembered that. Got my arm caught in the wringer one time, but Mama was standing right there. She grabbed that lever and got me out pretty quick. I was a little more careful after that. But I want to show you something else. Let's get this out of the way. Whew. Have you ever seen one of these? Now let me tell you, this thing's heavy. Probably weighs 10 pounds, I'm guessing. Take a good look. Mama had 2 of them. And at that point, we had gas stove in the kitchen. She turned the burner on. And she would set one of these irons on the burner, let it get good and hot. This was usually on Sunday mornings when we were getting ready to go to church. My sisters and I, we'd go to the kitchen, and we always had to press something, a blouse or our skirt or whatever, the dress we were going to wear. It needed pressing. Now, having had 2 of these irons, called a stove irons, what it's called, while one was heating, the other one was already hot, and we would iron with that one. When it cooled down, we put it on the stove to reheat, picked up the second iron, and continued to iron. Now that's how the ironing was done the day after wash day. You had to have 2 stove irons in order to iron. And I'm telling you, it wasn't easy. You're going to have to use 2 hands to hold this thing. Of course, you're not going to put your hand under it. But for those of you who've never seen one of those used, you don't want to ever have to use one. It was a trying time in those days. But I've still got this one. This one Mama still had. The other thing she had for wash day was this, and I know you've seen many of them. Many of them. See my washboard? Isn't that a dream? This was brass. This was used to do our lingerie or underwear, whatever you want to call it. We would put our underwear in the kitchen sink to soak, and we always, by the time we were old enough to start wearing nylon hose, we washed them in the kitchen sink. And this is what we used. You took that item, don't have anything here, you took that item and you scrubbed it up. You lay your bar of soap right here, lay it right there, and you rub your rag, well, not a rag, your panties and your bras and your nylon hose and daddy's dress socks, things like that. That's what got washed in the kitchen sink. And you rubbed them, scrubbed them like this. You can hear it. This washboard is older than I am because I used it before I became a teenager. And I know I'm going to say it was probably one of my mother's first items in housekeeping. So you can figure this little washboard is over 100 years old. No doubt about it. Don't even question it. Because if I used it, my older sisters used it. I don't have, but I had older sisters that are now over 100 years old. Now, that takes care of laundry day and ironing day. And of course, we had the sprinklers. You stuck your sprinkler down in a Pepsi bottle and sprinkled your clothes. And I remember one time as a teenager, I had the prettiest yellow batiste blouse. It had a ruffle around the neck, and it was kind of like eyelet. Oh, I had a brown, what was the name brand? You'd reckon, if you're as old as I am, you'd recognize the name brand. You were kind of up there in class if you had one of those suits. And I had one, it was brown, and I had my yellow batiste blouse. The ruffle came out over the lapel. I looked pretty good when I had on that. So the blouse had to be dampened and ironed. You dampened all of the laundry at the end of wash day, and the next day was iron day. Well, I didn't iron my little yellow blouse. I rolled it up and put it in the refrigerator. That's what you used to do. If you weren't going to iron it immediately, you put it in the refrigerator so that it stayed nice and damp. Well, I made the mistake of letting it sit in the refrigerator several days. I just didn't get around to ironing my pretty yellow blouse. And when I took it out of the refrigerator, it had mildew spots all over it. Now that's when a girl wants to cry. Her favorite blouse, she's ruined it because she wouldn't take it out of the refrigerator and iron it when she was supposed to. Now I only did that once. You know, it doesn't take twice to teach you something like that. Once will do. Oh, let's see, is there another story? No, but I do want to say this. I have been reading comments for days, and if you think I can just skim through those real quick, you're crazy. I sat on the couch the other day, and I think I read 1,000 comments. That's pretty good stuff. Pretty good comments. Nice people. Wonderful things they've said about me. And I'm so glad they think that about me, but I don't want my kids confessing what their mother really is like. She ain't half that good. But I let them think it. So I'm just kidding, of course. But I did want to say, some of you may notice or think that I haven't seen your comments. Some I reply to when the brain's working right and I can come up with something to say, or not just something to say, it's an answer that I think you will approve of. So I do try to answer as many comments as I can. And if I don't check where I've read it, that's because it's been overlooked. There are so many of them, and it's easy to overlook something someone has said, especially if it's a short comment. It kind of gets lost. So I don't want you thinking I am avoiding what you say to me. I don't want you thinking I don't care, because I do care. I care extremely. And to tell the truth, Jan reads every comment I get. And I told her I think she got more comments on my potato salad story than I did. And she laughed. Of course she laughed. But she's been a good supporter of what I'm doing. And she thinks you people are just wonderful. You've been so good to her mother. And I have to agree with her. And I'm starting to recognize names now and then over and over. And that makes me feel good. It tells me they like me. It tells me they like reading my stories. And I'm here to tell the stories. I tell the stories partly because I remember them. And I like telling the stories. And I want these things to be remembered. I want the young people someday to read my stories and say, I didn't know that's what they did back then. Now, my stories concerning me are nothing compared to my mother, my father, my grandparents. Wait till I get into the history of the wars and rumors of wars. And this is just in my family. I'm not talking about all of the other soldiers and veterans and the people who died during Revolutionary War, Civil War, I can't even think. First World War, World War II, and I really didn't have much contact with people in regard to the Vietnam. I was raising my own children and praying that my son would not reach the age where he would be drafted and have to go overseas and fight. And he didn't so far. So, keep writing, keep answering, and keep enjoying my story. And one of these days, I think maybe I'm going to get one of these dough bowls, but you won't catch me making biscuits every morning, that's for sure. Because that's something I didn't master. Give my mother credit for that. I used to say she's made enough biscuit that she could build a chain from here to China. And when company came, you better believed, they gathered around my mother's dinner table because they knew she was the best cook in the family. And they liked to visit Aunt Lizzie. I guess that ought to do it for today. I don't see anything sitting around that's going to grab me. And I got all those independent dishes off the table and did a little rearranging, moved them from one cabinet to another cabinet. Can't stand looking at something all the time, same all the time. My mother never moved a piece of furniture in the living room. It got put in its place and it stayed there till she died. And I used to think, Mama, why don't you put the couch on the other side of the room? Mama, why don't you move that rocking chair? Hang those pictures somewhere else. No, we didn't move Mama's furniture. It stayed right where she put it. So, I gotta get up, come around, and turn off the camera because I've got 2 clickers and neither one of them work. I'm real good about having things that don't work. But that's okay, as long as you get to see my videos and you respond. It suits me just fine. And thank you very much, very much.